Hello, this is Reverend Dr. Linda Small. I'm the pastor of the Litway Missionary Baptist Church, located at 2335 Shell Road in the Thunderbolt community of Savannah. And as always, we welcome you to another edition of Tell It Like It Is. Most of the time, of course, you've heard me preaching, but today I thought we'd do a show kind of informing and bringing people up to speed on maybe some of the current events and some of the things that are going on in our community. As always, we try to do these shows in order to inform our people and educate them, because an educated and informed people are least likely to be taken advantage of. Having been a part of an exploitated community, most of my life being African American in America, we know that if we are indeed educated, if we are indeed given the facts, then we can compete, we can thrive, we can strive, we can even excel. So that's why we do these shows. We believe that an informed people, an informed electorate, an informed populace is the best answer to bad government, people taking advantage of us systemically. And therefore now as we come, I want to give you a synopsis, an extraordinary thing that happened. And this is typical of what goes on, even though most people will not think that this actually happens. But let me explain it to you slowly if I can. About a year or so ago, in a local restaurant, a former captain on the fire department was inebriated, having drank too much, and he was with his wife and others, and he started calling the waitress by the N-word. I know people try to dodge the term. I'm not as afraid of the word as I am afraid of the treatment. Because my mama and my grandmother taught me sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. So if you treat me like a so-called N-word, then of course that's going to hurt me way more than you calling me one. But in this case, this fire chief, fire captain, out for dinner, not working, kept calling his waitress this word. And then when people sitting next to them protested, and they happened to be African American, man, his fiance, and one of their friends, then he started calling the man's fiance the N-word. The gentleman got up, approached him, and while he was still sitting, he kicked the fellow, the African American who approached him. They tussled a bit, and of course his fiance said, wait a minute, that's not what we came here for. They got him apart. They said they were leaving. They got to their car, but by that time the fire captain had gone to his car, retrieved his pistol, and came close to them in front of their car and pointed the gun directly at the gentleman's head and at his fiancee, waving. And he actually, listen to this, took out a badge and said because he had a badge and a gun, he could shoot them and get away with it. I'm not saying it verbatim, punctuating, but that's what he did. He actually showed them a badge telling them how he could actually get away with killing them. Ultimately, the police came. He resisted arrest. They arrested him, and of course, the type of things that happen under Georgia law, him getting the gun, pointing the gun at the people, threatening to kill them, made it an assault. That's aggravated assault. I mean, just prima facie case, which means a hard fact case. And therefore, there's no doubt about it that he committed aggravated assault when he pointed the gun and threatened their lives. Now, he was arrested. Once he was arrested, the police officers who arrested him, either on their own volition or on instruction from someone else, took him to jail and charged him with 3 misdemeanors. This was on a Friday night. On that next Thursday morning, I got a visit from one of our community activist, Alicia Blakely. She came directly to my house, 8 o'clock in the morning. She woke me up. I got up, she explained to me what had happened and said to me that the man was being charged with misdemeanors. Well, I'm an ex-offender, and of course, when you go to prison, you learn what the rules are, you learn about crime, you learn about how everybody else got there. And so I knew that there were men who had served time with me who had pointed a gun at someone who had been put in prison, given 10, 15 years. So how is this man given a misdemeanor? So we got up, 9 o'clock, we got down to the city hall. I asked to see the city manager. The city spokesperson came down. I think his first name is Brett. So when he came down, he said, Reverend Small, I'm looking into it. I heard what you're coming here for, and I'll get with you at 11. By 11 o'clock, this is 9 o'clock. 11 o'clock, he doesn't call me. 12 o'clock, I set up a press conference. 2 o'clock, I'm on my way to the press conference. And apparently the chief of police had me followed on my way there or something, because he comes out the side of the police barracks and heads me off, and I laughed, and he laughed, because I said, I know we've been following. And it was joking. There was no harm in it. And he said, well, why are you here, Reverend Small? You should be at the fire department. He's a fireman. I said, no, I'm here because the ball was dropped by the police department when they charged this man with misdemeanors. And of course, we had the press conference, went in the paper and things like that. And that was on a Thursday. Either the next day or a day or so later, the chief called me and said, yes, it has been addressed, and the man is charged with felonies. 3 felonies at the time, I believe. I looked on the sheets and went in there, did some research, and sure enough, at the jail, he was listed as charged with felonies. And normally with us, that's all we do. And we would stop, and they knew it. 2 months later, though, because I am a homework doer, I pulled his name up, and his cases had been referred to the magistrate court. Again, it's gone from misdemeanors to felonies. They were back to misdemeanors. We had an additional press conference where we showed that the police officer, not in this case, but in at least 2 or 3 other cases, had charged people with misdemeanors, and some of them African American, who had actually committed felonies. Now, here's the problem with this. When that takes place, we get unrealistic crime statistics. And so I started going around the community trying to find out how many times this was happening, and it was easy for me to find many cases where there should have been a charge of a felony, but they've charged it as misdemeanors, and therefore they've suppressed the criminal statistics far more than they would have been. Now, watch this. Sometimes it happened with African Americans, but only in cases where the victim was African American. In other words, sometimes African Americans were charged with misdemeanors. It happened more often with whites, but sometimes even in cases where African Americans, like we had a case of a young lady that we knew who someone had surreptitiously gotten her house and ultimately put their hands under her cover while she was sleeping and was feeling on her. Well, obviously that's a felony, but they actually charged him. This is an African American guy. They charged him with misdemeanors until we had the press conference about the fire captain being charged with misdemeanors, then being charged with felonies from police, then being lowered to misdemeanors by the DA's office again, while we were not supposed to be looking. So you would say, okay, well, Pastor, now they got him to felony, and we remember, many of you remember, it being in the newspaper that he actually did go to court. He was charged with the felonies. They null-prossed all the charges except one aggravating assault charge, and they fined him 2 years for that. Then they gave him suspended sentences under the First Offender Act and put him on probation, totaling about either 10 to 15 years. Now, as a result of them actually doing that, we're to the point now where we're thinking, Okay, he's gone to court. He's been before the judge. He's now sentenced to 2 years in prison. Oh, by the way, until we had the press conference in the first instance, he had not been fired as a fireman. He was only fired after we had the press conference. And people kept saying, well, no, it's being investigated. No. You got to remember now, in many, did I say many? In many cases, as soon as they find someone's done something, they fire them. Many people are fired on the spot. So in this case, he should have been fired on the spot. Be that as it may. So now we've gotten the fire captain from the misdemeanors charged by the police to raising it by the police to felonies, to reducing it by the DA's office to misdemeanors, to raising it again by the DA's office to felonies, to being found guilty by the judge and sentenced to 2 years in prison. And that should be the end of the story. But this is why you tell it like it is, because you need to find out what happens to other people, because there's a game being played. So now, if you will look up Chatham County Courts and look up the name Barry Arnold, and I want you to understand, this is not about Mr. Arnold. I have no axe to grind with Mr. Arnold. Matter of fact, I feel sorry for Mr. Arnold. He had a career, he had a family, he needed to take care of. His foolishness cost him that. Even though some of the men, people who worked with him, actually came and thanked me because they said he was really bad in terms of how he treated African Americans. But that's another whole story. But here's the deal. So now he's sentenced to go to the Georgia State Penitentiary with 2 years to serve. And he's put in the county jail on his way to prison. And it's put in the paper. Color picture. Ex-fire captain, 2 years to serve. Actually, they put up, gets 15 years, but actually it was only 2 years to serve. Because, a little sensationalism. So you would think he went to prison, right? Wrong. He didn't. Now, here's how you can find out. You can go on the Georgia Department of Corrections website and put it in inmate query. Put in his name. It's Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Arnold, A-R-N-O-L-D. There will be a Barry Arnold that comes up, but he's not from our jurisdiction. I think it's from DeKalb, a career criminal. You can look all you want. You won't find him. And then you can look at the ChathamCountyCourts.org. Look there too. And when you try to figure out what happened in the sentencing of him and the case that happened, he actually went to court on March 27th and was sentenced on that date, apparently. 27th, 28th, someplace up in there. So why is he still going to court all of the next month? And I think his last date may have been a date in May. Well, I'll tell you, since you want to know. Because after a person is sentenced, his judge retains the right to change the sentence. So after they put it in the paper, they assumed that we would stop looking. I didn't. And Mr. Barry Arnold, I don't believe, ever went to prison. So he went from misdemeanor, being charged by the police, to being charged with a felony by the police because we complained, to being charged by a misdemeanor by the DA's office, to being charged with a felony, again, because we complained. He went before the judge, got sentenced as a felon, committing a felony with a firearm, having threatened somebody's life. First of all, the least that anybody ever get that I know of any kind for having done this was 10 years. African Americans. For having a firearm and just brandishing it among people or shooting it arbitrarily in the air, 5 years. Okay? And charged with aggravated assault. Now, So they dropped 5 or 6 charges, no processing. That's the DA's office and the DA's prerogative. And they get him sentenced, and they put it in the newspaper. And then they come back when they think nobody's looking, and they let him go. Now, this is not about Barry Arnold. God bless you, brother. I hope you learn your lesson. This is about the court system of Chatham County. This is about playing the black community for fools. If you do such things as this, and then you send young men from our community to prison, 10, 12, 15 years. One young man recently, in a court where I was there, a young man who needed psychotropic drugs, who we went to the sheriff's office and made sure he got the medical treatment to get the proper drugs, who came into court as docile and as controlled and as calm as a human being can be because he was on his proper medication. But even though it was obvious that this young man had a psychological problem, the judge sentenced this young man to 5 years to serve. Now, he could get no mercy, but everybody in the system, time and time again, tried to give the fire captain mercy. Now, all we want is an even playing field. All we want is apples to apples, oranges to oranges. If we cannot clear the dust of unfair treatment based on race or based on ethnicity, based on station in life, who you're related to, if we can't clear that out of the system, then how can I justify telling young people to work hard and you'll finish well? How can I tell them, okay, all you got to do is get a good education? If we know that the game is stacked against them. One of the most grievous cases that I've ever witnessed was held under our present DA when she first came in. A young man by the name of Titus Franklin was on River Street celebrating some of his friends coming home on Labor Day weekend. Titus had a fight with a young man a couple of days before. I'm not giving the young man's name because that's not what's important here. That's not what's integral to the story. Titus Franklin was approached by the young man. Someone must have told him they were down there. And he said, basically, listen, I whipped your tail the other day, I'll whip you again. His friends, the 5 boys that were with him, along with 2 or 3 girls, said, listen, man, that's not what we came down here for. And was telling Titus, leave it alone. Titus said, no, he coming up on me like this. And he went forward. The young man knew what he wanted to do, pulled the gun, and from 2 or 3 feet away, killed him, shot him up. He went down. His friends took off their clothes, wrapped him up, called the ambulance, went to the hospital with him. He passed away. The young man who did the shooting fled, took the police off. Police 3 weeks to catch him. They caught him. Took him to the grand jury. They made an error and had a ex-felon on his grand jury. Therefore, when the judge found out, he threw his case out. The DA, our present DA, Mackey, decided to charge these young men who were with him, his friends, with his death. So she charged them, I want you to hear this, with more than 90 counts. At the time, Edna was the mayor. I think the chief was Willie Lovett. And they had this big press conference. They charged these friends of his. Remember now, There were 6 people on River Street. So one had died and 5 others. But they arrested 6 people. There was one young man who was home, but they attached them by association to these young men. And they charged that man who was home, who wasn't even on River Street, they charged him with murder too. 3 or 4 counts. Aggravated assault, having a weapon in the commission of a felony. And therefore, they locked those boys up and they held them for months and months and months, trying to get them to plead guilty to anything. Ultimately, and there's a lot more to it, but ultimately they were horribly served. The DA's office, the DA, Isabel DeWitt, did something that was patently wrong as a district attorney. When none of the boys would crack, and this was like 6 months in, and they just assumed some of them, because they were telling them, if you confess, we'll let you out tomorrow, we'll give you a reduced charge. So and so and so. You won't be charged with murder, you'll be charged with one thing or another, but you'll get out with time served. So they needed any one of them to say, yes, we were a gang. Frustrated because none of them cracked. Even the boy who was not even down there, who was still in jail. Now he was fragile, I'll be honest with you, because he was frantic. How am I in jail for murder? And I wasn't even there, much less that this was my friend. The young man who was murdered, his father and mother, I talked to both of them, were appalled that his friends were charged with his murder, particularly since none of them were doing any gang thing, and 3 of them were out of town in schools except for that weekend. So if they'd been in gang activity, they hadn't been for a year. But having said that, so they charged them, and they kept them. And of course, one by one, because these were young men who had never been to jail, they confessed and pled out to lesser charges. Nobody charged with a murder, by the way. All that was a sham. But this is what Isabel DeWitt, the prosecutor, did. She went to the jail by herself without court order and supervised and stood by while they shut down the men's cells, because she was looking for communication between them that would prove they were a gang. Now here's the problem with that. That is absolutely malpractice by the DA's office. That is absolutely malpractice by this district attorney's office. So if you put together the situation with the fire captain and the fact that they arrested these young boys, couldn't charge the guy who killed him, made up these crazy charges against his friends, charging them and having this grandstand of a press conference. Then on top of that, the DA goes out to the office, and here's the thing. We told the court-appointed lawyers and others who were these boys' defending lawyers, we told them that she'd done this. They all agreed she had no business doing it. They all understood that this was a violation of their ethic. But none of them would raise it because there's a retribution circumstance in the courts in Chatham County. And if you bring up certain things on certain judges on their watch, then they will make you pay if you're an attorney on your next client, on your next case. They were afraid. One young man had perfected a right to speedy trial. His lawyer had been missing cases and missing court and all kind of things. And so he told the judge to dismiss her. The judge ultimately did. While she was dismissed, he filed, as is his constitutional right, a petition for a speedy trial. And he filed it timely and appropriately for the law. And they knew it. When they finally appointed him a court-appointed lawyer, it was a week before the statute would run that would make it impossible for them to prosecute him. When that lawyer was told about the fact that this young man should be let out free based on speedy trial, that lawyer said, I will not raise that question. I said, why not? He said, because it's going to cause the judge and the DA to get angry with me. Whose case is this anyway? Now, this is not going on in a third world country. This is not going on halfway around the world. This is going on in Chatham County. And guess what? If you're a taxpayer here in Chatham County, you're paying for these injustices. I am inconvenient. I am a minister. I am a pastor. I am an activist. I've been involved in civil rights and human dignity fights for more than 50 years. I did my first demonstration when I was 9 years old. I'm not afraid of the system because the system is corrupted. Lastly, I like for people to be informed. So let me tell you something on a national scale, and this will be quick. When they tell you that we need to beef up our army, beef up our military industrial complex, it's just because they want to spend money on stuff that they want to spend money on and get rich among themselves. How do you know, Pastor Small? Because I want you to look at this. One of our chief rivals in the world is Russia. Now, just think about this. Russian economy is about $1.6 trillion annually. That's their gross domestic product, 1.6 trillion. The gross domestic product of California, one of our states, is 2.4 trillion. One of our states has more principal collective wealth than the whole nation of Russia. How can they compete against us? We're being bamboozled. Not only California, but Texas and the state of New York, individually, has a greater domestic product than the entire nation of Russia. They can't compete with us. It's like a heavyweight fighter in the ring with a midget. This is telling like it is.